And there are theologians and there are Christians today who would be wildly uncomfortable with that. But Elijah had a chance to help Naaman continue his relationship with God and to develop into who he was going to be.
In a way that he understood would be meaningful to him.
In a way that he understood would be meaningful to him. And I don't have any like follow up on like what did Naaman do, any of those types of things. But what happens a lot of times in the Old Testament and here is that people recognize something that God is doing.
Right.
And they're not Jewish people. But God is working through them to do something significant, because right after they have this thing where they go and they find the King of the Jews and they celebrate him and they're like, hey, that star, we found him. This is awesome. And they worship him.
Yeah.
Right. And, then they go and take a nap.
And they get a dream.
Yeah. And so God is talking to them.
He is.
You know, the angel of the Lord comes and has a message with him. He says, Herod is going to mess you up if you go back to him. You need to go a different way.
Yep.
This is what's going to happen. And so God brings divine protection for these magi. Like, God is doing a lot of things that we're not expecting.
Right.
And he's working with a lot of people we're not expecting. And we don't get the story, but I would love to, if somebody is like a history nerd and you know something, I'd love to see like these magi who go back. What does that do? What does that do to that area they come from? Is there anything in history that is recorded?
That's a good point. What was there any change? They went and found the King of the Jews, and then they went back. What story did they bring? What change did it make in their own worship and their own lives?
There's so many questions that I have. I was talking about this on a couple Sundays ago, maybe last Sunday, when I was preaching with a guy by the name of Matthew Nunley, who I'm going to have on the podcast soon. Is that often God is doing things in the scriptures that like we don't ever get to read about.
Right.
There's 400 silent years between Malachi and the book of Matthew. Are we under the impression that God didn't do anything during that time?
Did nothing happen during that time?
Or are we also under the impression that like these 18 years that that Jesus was growing up between 12 and 30, that nothing was happening during this time?
I can't imagine that's the case.
I mean, I don't go a day where God doesn't like do something in my life,
right?
Like specifically, and that's not a New Testament thing. That's always who he's been.
Right.
Yet not everything is written about.
Nope.
It's just, I think that when we recognize that God is always at work around us. So this is coming back. We've talked a few years ago. We talked about a guy by the name of Henry Blackaby, wrote a series called Experiencing God. Says one of the first things about knowing and doing the will of God is recognizing that God is always at work around you.
I will say that we miss God so often. Every day, God is at work in our lives and responding in so many ways that we just miss. And I've really tried to focus more on that. And you try to examine your days and see, what did God do today? Where was God? And there's times you have to look back at the end of the day and go, oh, I missed it there. Or that was an inkling that I had from the Holy Spirit that I should have done that, or spoke to that person. Or there are times when you get more in tune with that, you respond, and it's like you just feel that little pull, and it's like, I need to go talk to that person.
And it's this crazy thing, and the reason I'm bringing it up is because when we read these passages, you 100% need to see the meta-narrative about Jesus, about the Old Testament connections, but I also want to be the kind of people who are curious.
Yeah.
And we say, what did they do after this? Like, what does it mean when you encounter, like, what happens when you encounter the transformative God?
Yeah.
You know? And then, like, what happens with them afterwards?
Right.
Like, how does that change around them? Like, what happens in their space? And sometimes we don't have the answers, but I can't think that that's not important for us to think about and to dwell on, and being like, how the little things that we do in our life, these little ways that we love people, these little ways that we provide for people, these little places that we bring light to people, like, what are the profound, like, ramifications of that over time?
Yeah.
That was it.
No, I get it. That's good. What are the ramifications of that?
So they get the dream. God likes to talk in dreams. He's already talked to Joseph in a dream. He appeared to Mary. He's now told the Magi, "Hey, go the other way."
I mean, I get this as we go through this. Joseph is this guy. His obedience and his faith in God, to me, is just outstanding. I mean, I think there should be more looked into, talked about that, because he got a dream. I mean, from the time Mary got pregnant to now, it's like a dream. Go to Egypt. Okay, gone. Yep. Okay, come back. Okay, just checked out. He's like,
Well, and we talked about this a couple episodes, Spencer and I, is that because nobody recognized Jesus as Messiah until after his death, that means that the entire time that Jesus was growing up, the entire time that Joseph was alive, because he was dead at some point, he lived with the shame of everybody assuming that Jesus was born to another man.
right.
Right? That his wife cheated on him, or that he violated the covenant early.
Correct.
Right? And
That
and
cloud was hanging over his
they
head
just
all the
walked
time.
with that shame their entire life willingly because of the word of the Lord spoke to them.
Yep.
And I often wonder how many times Christians, because God is calling them to do something, have to walk with shame from the world,
Because the world doesn't understand.
because the world doesn't understand what they have to step into.
Yeah.
Right. Now, of course, there's always the flip side of that, is like sometimes people bring things on themselves because they don't represent Jesus well.
Yep.
I have a phrase that I've said a lot, and I'll probably put on a t-shirt at some point. If the world doesn't like you because of Jesus, that's life.
Yeah.
If they don't like you, or they don't like Jesus because of you, that's sin.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll never get through if I don't hurry up here. So we'll get back into here. So they go down to Egypt, and they're down in Egypt, and then Herod dies. And we kind of told the story about that. There's conversation about he might have had gangrene or kidney disease. Kidney disease seems more likely to me if you're a guy drinking a ton, probably drinking a ton, and not doing a whole lot.
Right.
Like you're just sitting on wealth. So his kingdom is then divided among his sons. One guy by the name of Archelaus, he rules Judea, Samaria, and the Idumea. Sorry, I'm reading this, my eyes crossed for a second. Archelaus is known for his cruelty. That's
Taken after his old man.
Yep, and he is actually later deposed by Rome. There is Herod Antipas, who is going to be the one that Jesus interacts with the most. This is the one who ruled Galilee and the Perea, and this is going to be the one that John the Baptist comes up against also. And then there's going to be Philip, who ruled the northeastern territories. That's like Florea and Trachonitis. Wow, those are different. Yeah, I always tease Nick about not reading these names, Pastor Nick, about not reading like the names on Sunday morning, and I get it. It's difficult. So then after Herod dies, the angel says, okay, you can come back now.
Right.
This king has died, and his kid is in his place. By the way, think Egypt. When does Moses come back? Pharaoh's died.
Pharaoh's died.
Pharaoh's died, and he comes back after that. So, fearing Archelaus in Judea, Joseph settles in a place called Nazareth. It's a small, obscure village in Galilee. Nazareth is incredibly insignificant in Jewish history, which, by the way, Nathaniel in John is going to say, Nazareth, does anything good come out of there?
Exactly.
Right?
Yep, he does. Yeah.
They're like, yeah. I'm trying to think of a town that is known for nothing, but I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I would just have to pick on people, and then,
I know, and I don't want to.
And then there's probably listeners who live there, and I'd be like, this city, and they're like, hey I live there. Yeah, we'll pick on LA. No, just kidding. But he actually connects his Matthew is going to connect Jesus' residence to prophecy, stating that he would be called a Nazarene. Right. This may refer to the Hebrew word, which is netzer, also known as branch, alluding to the prophecies of the Messiah as a branch from David's line, or it could be a symbolic representation of humility, as Nazareth was looked really far down upon. Either one of those I'd be totally fine with.
Sure.
It's basically especially when you start to compare Jesus with Caesar Augustus, which is happening around the same time. Jesus is bringing a kingdom of peace. Caesar promised a kingdom of peace, but they're very different kingdoms.
Very much so.
Caesar is like, I was born with a golden spoon in my hand, and it was like this grand thing, and Jesus is like, well, I was born and placed in a trough.
Yeah.
Grew up in Nazareth.
Yep. Very different.
Very different people.
Very different.
Right.
It's not what you think it is.
So let's do a couple of broad, very broad conclusions from this story. One is the story is going to show Jesus as a stepping into a story that's been being told for a long time. Some way we call that is we call it a fulfillment of prophecy. I call it a little bit different. I said Jesus is stepping into a story that's been told long before he got there.
Right.
He's stepping into a context. And Matthew's like, hey, just so you know, this is why Jesus is doing this. This has been the story all along, and he's stepping right into the middle of this.